Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy Boulanger. Up next, Ravens versus Bengals, down to the last minute. Let's talk. The Baltimore Ravens get a big time win last night at home, primetime football Thursday night. They get a big win after kind of sleepwalking the entire first half, and it was kind of one of those games you were wondering if you were a Ravens fan and you've been watching this team for some time. You wondered, is this one of those games that they would trick off? That's what you were kind of wondering when you went into the half. I believe that the Baltimore Ravens were down 21-7, and we knew that we would get the ball first in the second half. Well, we come out and we do what? Go 3 and out. And that's when it kind of starts, that's when it kind of starts settling in that, hey, this just might not be our night. But let's talk about the first half and what we saw. Well, in that first half, I think part of the problem for our offensive woes, the reason why I think we looked so disjointed offensively, is because the Bengals dominated time of possession. It was like 10 minutes Ravens, 20 minutes Bengals in that first half. They had ran, I think, almost 20 plays before I think we had ran 4 or 5. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was so lopsided. And so for us to only be down with the way they dominated the clock, dominated the play count in the first half, 21-7 at the halftime, really was kind of miraculous in some aspects, right? And so when we come out into the second half, I'm thinking we're going to go right down and put some points up. But of course, we had to punt the ball away. And the defense, there was some good, and then there was a lot of bad, right? And I do mean a lot of bad, but let me keep talking about the offense. And then it was just like Lamar Jackson was like, you know what? Let me put the cape on, and whoever gonna ride with me, you jump on, and if you ain't, you sit on the sideline and you watch. Because when he put the cape on and turned in to Action Jackson, then you saw the offense come alive. The pass game started working. Now, the run game never really got on track a whole lot. Derrick Henry had a couple of runs here and there that accumulated about 70 yards for him. But it never really looks like the Baltimore Ravens from the last couple of weeks. And I got another video to talk about the run game specifically and why we could have seen this game coming. And so Lamar Jackson scores 3 touchdowns in the second half and throws, I think, for 280 yards or 270 yards in the second half, because I believe he only had 71 yards passing at the end of the first half, which is unheard of in Lamar Jackson's career. Nevertheless, right, we had to score and get a 2-point conversion after Justin Tucker had already missed an extra point. So there's a lot of things against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens offense. And we held up and we came out with another close victory against the Bengals. And thank goodness we don't have the Bengals again this year, right? Because it seems like defense goes out of the window and it has to be offensive fireworks in order for us to get a win, right? And so, man, I want to give some shout outs offensively before I talk about the defense. I want to give a shout out to Lamar Jackson, number one, for putting the team on his back and doing what he needed to do with his arm and with his legs, mostly with his arm, to get this team to a victory, right? I want to give a shout out to Mark Andrews for stepping up in a larger role last night with Isaiah Likely being out. Mark Andrews was called in to have a higher snap count last night, and he stepped up and made some big catches. I want to give a shout out to Tylan Wallace, right? A guy who has been underused all season, basically all his career in Baltimore. And he makes a big time catch and takes it down the sideline, avoids stepping out of bounds for 80 plus yards to the house. And then he turns around and makes another big catch, leading the Baltimore Ravens in receiving last night. So shout out to Tylan Wallace, man, for stepping up, man, when he was called upon. I'm going to give a shout out to Derrick Henry for still trying to run hard, even though the run game wasn't really working last night. Shout out to the offensive line for having really good pass blocking, right? I know Lamar Jackson had to scramble and move the pocket a little bit, but for the most part, he was able to have the time he needed to deliver the ball. And although I'm giving a shout out to the offensive line, the offensive line did have some woes, some self-inflicted stuff, man, that almost cost us this game. Jumping off sides, there was an illegal formation. Daniel Falele had 2 holding penalties on plays that were positive for the Baltimore Ravens. And then those kind of penalties kept us behind the chains all night long. And so here we are in week 10, still having to clean up and address some things that showed up in the early part of the season. But nevertheless, we did get the win. So those guys still deserve a shout out. Let me jump over to the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to give a shout out, number 1, to Marlon Humphrey, who had the punch out and gave the Baltimore Ravens another opportunity to score offensively. I think that was a game-changing play. But for the remainder of the defense, guys, I just don't know anymore. I don't know if it's scheme, personnel, both. But and it's not just Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase who shows up and shows out on us. It's almost every quarterback who plays us. Everybody is knocking on 300 yards when they play us. It's just like we cannot make a play. It's like we can't make a tackle at times. It's like we can't play in coverage. It's just a bad example. It's just a bad example of football. It really, really is. And we got some household names, right? And it's just like they don't come together. It's like they're not talking in the secondary, or they're not understanding the scheme. You see, we get dominated when we're in zone coverage. Our man coverage last night, defensively, showed better resistance against the pass for the most part. But when we go to zone, man, we cannot cover. And I'm not sure why we keep going to zone, right? I know that Meta BK, got off some sacks last night. I think he had 3 last night. But the edge rushers are almost non-existent. And when we get to Joe Burrow, we don't bring him down. There was a couple of times where Odafe had Joe Burrow in his grasp. And he just shook Odafe off and delivered a strike. And so I'm not sure what has to be done 10 weeks in. But something has to be done. There's nobody coming to save us. There's nobody out there that we can add to this team who might spark something. And I'm concerned, man. Specifically defense. If this Baltimore Ravens offense doesn't score on average 35 points per game, we can't win. Not at this point. Not at this point. I don't know if it's time for us to switch out Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson for the rookies. I mean, why not? They can't play worse. They can't play worse than this. They can't play worse than what we've seen from Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson. What was the point in keeping those young talents if you're not going to try them out? I just don't know which one is the problem. Is it scheme or personnel or both? But we have 10 days before we get back on the field again. It may be time for a demotion for Zach Orr. It may be that kind of time. Because this defense has not improved at all in 10 weeks, especially in the back end. I do want to give a shout out to our run defense. I think we held them to 49 yards rushing last night. I want to give a shout out to Odafe, not because he got any sacks, but just because he was able to show up in the run. Meta BK showed up well in the run game. Travis Jones showed up well in the run game. So I do want to give a shout out to those guys. But holistically, man, we didn't play well. I want to give a shout out to Darius Washington, who actually played well in relief of Kyle Hamilton. So hopefully he can get back and healthy by the time we get back on the field. I know he was in a walking boot last night, so we'll have to wait on the news maybe next Wednesday and next Thursday to kind of have an idea if he'll be ready for Pittsburgh. But I just don't know, guys. I don't know what we're really seeing from this defense. It's not making a lot of sense. I know that, and this is the reason. This is the reason why EDC should have went out and made a move for an edge rusher. Because when your back end can't hold up, you have to get that quarterback on the ground multiple times. You have to make him uncomfortable. And I know they did make him uncomfortable in the pocket with some consistency, but we don't have that guy who can just go get home off that edge. And so it's almost as if other quarterbacks, they don't really worry about our edge. They just dance around in the pocket, move around left and right, and keep their eyes downfield because they don't believe that we have a guy. You know, last night was probably the most Metabike has shown up all season. Right? You heard that in the telecast. Hey, they've been waiting on him to show up all year. So maybe last night is a start to something. I don't know. But something needs to happen somewhere. I thought it was a bad move that they would waive Ndakwe because he's been the only edge rusher to really show some individual pass rush, right? So maybe they'll add him back to the practice squad and get him back on the team or something. I'm not 100% sure. But I saw David Ajabo back. Null and void. His impact on last night's game was nothing. It was nothing. And so, I don't know. I don't know, guys, about that secondary. This game, although it was a win, it really increases the concern for what we don't have defensively. I do believe that, as I'm just thinking through things, it's just kind of like improv. I do believe that the Brandon Stevens interception was an interception and should have been called as such. That would have been a game-changing play. But other than that, man, we didn't make no plays defensively. And so we made everything be on the offense, which is not the norm. It's the norm this year, but it's not the norm holistically. And so I have a loss for words, man, for what they're going to need to do defensively. But I do expect, I'm telling you, if John Harbaugh is a true head coach, I think you see a Zach Orr demotion this week coming. If he's a real head coach, there is no reason to think anything changes under Zach Orr's leadership. And so that's my thoughts, man. I'm your guy Boulanger. This is the GM, and I'm out.